It says we're live.
Okay. All right, then we're live, I guess. So, welcome everybody who joined us tonight or this afternoon or lunch break, maybe in New York City. So, I'm here with Jonathan Sabbagh from Journey Clinical, and we're going to talk about ketamine today. So, but Jonathan, maybe quickly intro, what is Journey Clinical? What are you guys doing?
Sure. Do you want to start with an intro of myself?
Yeah.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Journey Clinical. It's nice to be here with you, Anne. Always a pleasure to chat with you. Um, at a high level, my background, I grew up in Switzerland. I started my career in finance. I built two companies from the ground up and moved to New York. And when I built my first company, I actually suffered a pretty substantial burnout, which, unknown to me, turned out to be the result of undiagnosed PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, I work with traditional medicine. It helped me, but it didn't quite get me completely better. And so eventually, a few years ago, a friend of mine introduced me to psychedelics. I started working with first ayahuasca. It was very, very transformative and very helpful. And after a while, I started to have repeated difficult experiences. And while this medicine was very transformative for me, I couldn't quite integrate the insights that I was having during these ceremonies. And so I was introduced to a therapist here in New York who I started doing ketamine-assisted therapy with. Uh, that was a game changer for me. First, he diagnosed me with PTSD, which was a big relief. And then I started to be able to integrate these insights much better. And so eventually I got a lot better much faster. That also led to a career change where I'm sorry, there is a dog in our office barking at my dog. That's the live component. So it led me to a career change. I didn't quite feel meaning in my work in finance anymore, and eventually decided to quit finance and go back to school at the age of 38 to study clinical psychology. And that was a big, big change for me. And while I was studying to become a clinician, I actually felt the need to integrate my background as an entrepreneur to found Journey Clinical. So I dropped out of school again and founded it with my amazing wife, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago.
So, and can you quickly introduce the model of Journey Clinical? Because it's a very interesting, growth-friendly model, how ketamine therapy or CAP can be introduced to therapists. And it's a very unusual, I mean, in the beginning, it seemed a very unusual model, and now it turns out it's one of the most stable ones, I would say.
Of course, yeah. I can give you a quick background. So, at Journey, our vision is to help therapists cure anxiety and depression for good by leveraging psychedelics. And what we landed on is that, leveraging existing networks of therapy practices through behavioral health and having them distribute these treatments. Can you excuse me 1 second? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, this is live and I've got a bit of a dog problem, so I'm going to come back in 1 second. Excuse me.
Okay. The dog problem. Okay. So, yeah, we're waiting for Jonathan to solve the dog problem. And so we just have like hopefully just 1 minute until he's back. But in the meantime, I maybe use the time to maybe talk about how ketamine is actually, as a therapy, actually available in many places and many cities in Europe and also in America. So, and most people actually never heard about this, that they actually can look into this with the support of a doctor. And I feel like, especially in Berlin, where I'm based, there are many opportunities to do this. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a really big change in terms of therapy that we're all experiencing. And yeah, I hope this is kind of transforming the whole psychedelic world. And I actually have to say, more and more people are approaching me to request where they could actually go and to do ketamine therapy. And it's actually quite an interesting experience. And I did it myself in actually in the pandemic between two mushroom experiences. And it kind of really helped me to work on the content that I had experienced in the mushroom sessions. Oh, you're back. Okay. I'm just took the advertising break to talk about my ketamine experience. But now we're coming back to Journey Clinical quickly.
Please finish. Please finish.
All right, I just said like I squeezed it in between two mushroom experiences, and it was very helpful in the pandemic because you couldn't leave the country. It was very helpful to kind of explore the content that one had learned in the mushroom experiences. But you wanted to finish on the model that Journey Clinical is displaying.
Of course. So as I was saying, we found that leveraging existing network of therapy practices by leveraging behavioral health and collaborative care for them to deliver these treatments to their patients was essentially the most safe and effective way to do so. And the reason is because therapists are already embedded in local communities. They have a relationship with their patients, and the therapeutic alliance that they have with their patients is actually the best way to deliver this care. And so this is a good moment to understand essentially what we are and what we're not. We're not an online ketamine company. We're not a brick and mortar ketamine clinic. What we've built is necessary infrastructure to deliver psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy safely, responsibly, and at scale. And something to really understand here is that there's a gold standard of care in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and that gold standard always involves the therapist. And so if you consider what clinical trials do or how it's been administered in that context, it's really having the therapist work with the patient on doing preparation, and we can talk through what that means, but usually it's preparing them for the experience, basically doing an intake and spending time with them so that they are ready for what's going to happen and also have the correct framework to sit with those medicines, being there during the session where they're administered the psychedelic, and most importantly, really working with them in integration sessions so that they can integrate these insights, and that really is what shows to promote long-term behavioral changes. And so this is not just a drug treatment where they're receiving a drug, it's really a treatment course that is supported by psychedelics. And of course, we only work with currently FDA-approved drugs, so right now that's ketamine. And so we're the only company that's supporting mass adoption of that gold standard at scale. And at a very high level, what that means is that we support a collaborative care model where, therapists are our primary focus and our primary customer, really, although ultimately to support the millions of people that need it. And so we work with the therapist. We have a 100-person medical team, all composed of psychiatric nurse practitioners. We have a medical director called Kyle Lapidus, who is an MD PhD from Albert Einstein, used to oversee MAP sites. And our therapist effectively acts as a hospital system that serves as the in-house doctor for therapy practices. And so we work with therapists when they onboard to help them assess their patient population. We work with them to understand how the treatment is going to unfold. We are there when they need us. So we're actually operating as a vigilance system 24/7 on call. During the sessions, they get a call back within 3 minutes if they need support. And it's also collaborative care, right? It's not simply in the beginning or if something goes wrong, we're actually looping them in to the ongoing care of their patients and adapting the treatment plan based on the insights that the therapists are sharing back with us and working with us. So the patient is actually getting a care team of a world-class medical team and the therapist of their choice to support them in their journey. And at a high level, it works. They send us their patients. They meet our medical team through telehealth. And we actually only prescribe for 2 courses of treatment. It's not just 2 doses. A course of treatment is, 1 hour of preparation, 2 hours of dosing, 1 hour of integration. And then the patient has to come back to us for a full 30-minute consultation. So the first one is a 1 hour consultation. We are very conscientious about it. And then they have to come back for a follow-up, and they'll get sublingual ketamine at home that they bring for the most part to their therapist practice. We also support psychiatric medication management. So, we can take on all of their medication as well, because we believe that that care shouldn't be disjointed. And then, for the therapist, after that, they get access to a whole, essentially, support system that includes education. So we've actually built an education continuum at Journey Clinical. Therapists who join our platform get access to a 22-module CAP training, for which we give C credits, which is a world-class training developed by a company called Fluence for us. They have peer consultation groups with other members or expert-led. They have mentors, supervisors. They get the ability to actually, have the treatment if they're eligible, and then they get more advanced trainings. They're able to, a lot of our therapists become trainers in our network, and so they give back, they train other people, and then there's a whole community function that's actually very, very active, where we have a Facebook-like interface on our platform. We have maybe more than 1,000 meetups in person that occur, maybe 2 meetups a week. So people are very supported, and having thousands of other people across the country that do the same thing supporting you is a big deal. We also now, we have a whole platform. So there's a portal for the prescriber, a portal for the therapist, a portal for the patients. We help them with marketing resources. We help them build their CAP practice. We give them legal resources. And we now launched insurance. So we have insurance coverage at Journey Clinical. We take insurance from multiple large payers for our E&M visits, but we also now have the ability to process the claims for the therapy practices. So therapists can 1099 with us, and we can take on all the admin of insurance claims processing for them. So really being that back end. And so that's expanding into also med management and other modalities. And then finally, we're partnered with, some of the largest drug developers in the country. So Compass Pathways, who's developing COMP360, which is psilocybin, and which will likely be the next drug approved, is a partner of us, and we work with them on go-to-market and training for therapists, and the therapists in our network have access to that and are working with us. So today, we're the largest provider of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy in the world. We have more than 2,500 therapists in our network across 19 states. Our therapists have delivered more than 100,000 hours of CAP to date. And that's at a very, very high level, Journey Clinical.
Let's come quickly back to the substance, because I feel like, like ketamine now, because it is also one of the available substances right now for therapy. It's a lot in the news. There are many things that are happening around it, but I feel like a lot of people still would have no idea unless they might have experienced maybe something in a club context, which is a very different experience, of course, as in a therapeutical setting. But so how would you describe the experience? Because some people, and we talked about this in the podcast, would even say it's not a psychedelic. You can't have a psychedelic experience with it. Only plant medicine could give you a spiritual experience. So, but it has a very specific way to work on you. So how would you describe it to somebody who asks you, how does it feel if I'm on ketamine in a therapy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So first of all, we only work within a medical model, right? We work with licensed mental health professionals. We have a medical team that provides medical supervision, and we work within that gold standard that I was discussing. So this is, again, preparation, dosing, and integration. So this context is really to support the therapy, not just to have a drug experience. It's really important to understand that and to support healing in that context. Now, ketamine as a drug, basically has a number of properties. One of them is that and it's prescribed off-label, by the way, so it's the use of ketamine off-label. It's a dissociative anesthetic, but it also has the ability to help regulate glutamate in the central nervous system. And there's a theory called the glutamate theory of depression, which says that if the neurotransmitter glutamate is poorly regulated in your central nervous system, it might be one of the physiological causes of depression. And so essentially, ketamine acts as an antagonist to neuroreceptors. So, I mean, for those who don't know, neuroreceptors are absorb neurotransmitters, and an antagonist means that it acts as a lock and it blocks that absorption, so it's reabsorbed in through the central nervous system, and so that helps regulate it. And it's also a promoter of neural plasticity. So what neural plasticity is learning pathways. When we're born, we have a tremendous amount of them. And substances like psychedelics have shown to be able to promote new neural plasticities, which helps us change our perspective, right, on certain memories that we have. So if you look at neurons of people who are really traumatized or really stressed even, the neural pathways tend to retract. And when you when you use ketamine or other psychedelics, it really enhances that. So that allows to, change the way we see something and not just keeping about the same memory all the time. And there's a window of neuroplasticity that's about 7 days, usually after the absorption of ketamine. And so that's why also working with someone to integrate that experience during that window of neuroplasticity is really important, because that really helps us, right, shift our perspective. I think, again, maybe, explaining what a preparation and dosing and integration session is like in that context, it might be useful here. If you consider, especially people having their first ketamine experience, well, they often ask the question you asked me, right? Which is, what is this like? What is it going to feel like? What's going to be the experience? And so something that really exists in the context of ketamine-assisted therapy, but even psychedelic experiences as a whole, is that people who haven't had them before feel like they have an expectation of what it's going to be like. And it's often a breakthrough experience. They expect to come out of there a different person, a changed human. And so what that creates is something called transference, right? Where we transfer expectations and emotions. And it happens very naturally, actually, when you have a therapist. Like the dynamic of transference to your therapist, where they replace a mother or a father, or a parent that you're close to, is part of therapy. It's part of that alliance. And this counter transference, where they feel also, your therapist feels transference towards you. But there is such a thing as transference to the drug itself. In this case, a drug or a treatment that's going to change you or heal you and make you a changed person. And so that transference can be a little tricky, because if your expectation is that you're going to do one treatment and then it's done, and that in that treatment you'll emerge a new person, you're likely going to be disappointed. The experience is likely not going to be what you entirely expected when you went in there. And so for some people, they may feel like they failed again
I
to
heard that
achieve
many
a state. And that is very that can be difficult for someone, especially someone who's traumatized, to have that emotion. And so what preparation, in my opinion, is and should be for in the context of psychedelic assisted therapy, is actually, like, first of all, a full intake of the person working with their therapist to get their history if they don't know them already, and then also explaining, to sit with the experience itself. It's actually managing expectations. Often people talk about setting intentions, and that may work, but psychedelics they're effectively a non-specific amplifier, right? So, things that are in your mind may come up. And the word psychedelic, just for context, means mind manifesting, right? So if something comes up when if you're thinking about your day and that's really occupying your mind, it might just come up during your experience, and you might start thinking of work, or, it's possible. So what I think proper preparation does is actually bringing sort of like a mindful perspective to this. and simply sitting with the experience, right? You do have drugs in your brain. They are affecting your neurons. And maybe it's not a massive experience. Maybe you're going to have a second one with a different dosage or an adjustment to, or maybe you'll be more rested and more open to it. But that is the first part of it. So bringing that mindset of, reducing expectations and being present is really important. The way the dosing session happens in our context, for example, is that, as I said, there's a full 1 hour medical intake. We assess if people are eligible or not. We check for counterindications. We don't work with people who are actively, in substance abuse. So we really check for that. It's also not appropriate to work with someone who has ketamine substance abuse. That would not be a good idea. And when they receive their treatment, we have a whole sort of like course of themselves getting ready to prepare their mind for it. So they'll slow down, they'll have their preparation session, they'll eat a certain way, they will not watch television the day before. You need to make room for this experience in your life, right? This is
Oh,
not
really? Is that
something
what
that,
you recommend? That you don't watch television the day before? Interesting.
well, what you want to do is kind of like any big experience, right? May it be psychedelics, may it be meditation, maybe simply even getting a massage or going on rest or allowing time for yourself. If you're going to make room in your life to invest in this for
Mhm.
you, it's worth, quieting your mind a bit and preparing yourself to be present with that. So we really have a whole track actually for patients, and the therapists are a huge part of it to get ready for that experience. And then when they go, most of our sessions happen in person at the therapist office. So they'll bring the ketamine with them. They are accompanied by somebody. We also ask them to don't have too much problems with nausea, and they will, take the drug in presence of this therapist. They self-administer it. It's a swish and spit protocol. The reason why we do that is it's easier to control the dosage with the rapid dissolving tabs. And then, they will have what I would call an inward experience. And so the first part of the journey, it usually lasts about 90 minutes. The effects of the drug themselves, so maybe they're there 20 minutes before, will be an inward experience where they will start to feel the effects of the drug. The onset's about 20 minutes. And then, we encourage, all our therapists or our protocols encourage people to put an eye mask on. So it's a mask that blocks out the lights. There's a music set that goes with it that either we provide or therapists have their own. We leave them the choice of that. And then they have a cover, they have an inward experience. And in that inward experience, a lot can come up, a lot of insights. This is not as strong as you would say an ayahuasca experience. So sometimes it's a gentler experience, ketamine, at least that's been my experience with it, but also very insightful and allowing you to actually be with memories sometimes that can be very difficult in a very safe setting and interacting with them quite positively. And then the other thing that we've noticed is that at the end of the sessions, often a lot of material comes up where you
Mhm.
have, it's actually in the less cinematic portions of that experience. Some people have visuals, some don't. But when it starts to quiet down, people start to have a lot of memories or insights that start to come up. I have a theory about that. I think that because ketamine is an anesthetic, it creates essentially when you start to re-embody, so come into your body, ketamine tends to throw you a little bit outside of your body like an anesthetic would. You start to have feeling in your fingers, feeling in your feet. And so that's a bottom-up process, right? And a bottom-up process means that the signal going to your brain is coming from your body and not the other way, not your brain sending it to your body. And
Mhm.
so people who have trauma, for example, tend to dissociate from their own body, and so don't often experience their body and their feelings. It's actually a defense mechanism. And psychedelics are also a defense lowering mechanism, but the ketamine itself, I think when they start to feel their body again, it creates a bottom-up process. And sometimes rubbing your hand will help you get out of dissociation. And so I think that's what happens also a little bit in this context is they start to get back into their body. And the combination of the ketamine, the lowered defenses, the state of mindfulness in which you're in and feeling safe because you're held in a container with a therapist that you feel good about allows for a lot of people on the back end of the experience to really start to have a lot of material that comes up, and having the therapist present to help you process that on the moment is a really huge deal. And then after that, people will go home. Someone needs to be picking them up, so they need to have someone with them there. You're gonna have some food after a while, and then eventually in the next few days, work with your therapist to go back on the material. And our training really encourages therapists not to interpret it for the patient, but help the patient bring meaning to what they experienced during that session and work to integrate in their lives. And the course of treatment is usually 8 courses of this. So you have the 2 first sessions. They'll come back for dose adjustment with us to assess if they need a higher dose or not, or a lower dose maybe. And then they'll do 6 more usually with their therapist, and then they come back as needed.
I mean, I find interesting when I heard you talking that I was remembering like what the first session I remember very well I had, and it was like a lot of movie content that came to me from movies I've seen like 10 times, and I had no idea why I've seen them 10 times until this ketamine session was happening. So, and it was really interesting how basically entertainment content, let's call it, can also help you to find the topic you're working on, weirdly. I mean, I didn't watch television before, although it was in the pandemic, but I found like I only saw scenes from Lost in Translation and Lawrence from Arabia. What am I seeing here? Why are these two movies together? And then I kind of worked with the therapist afterwards. For him, it made total sense, kind of like, because of course we had talked about my topics before. And then actually, like, let's say the first session became, let's say, brought to you by Entertainment Insight, but then it became less and less this kind of outside information. And it became more and more like, also in the end, like after in session 12, like really, let's say, if you want to keep the entertainment language, like original content that came from me, kind of. So is there a journey? I mean, it's journey clinical, but is there a journey from where you actually shed also some layers of your kind of psyche and or like your, let's say, I mean, I feel like in every psychedelic experience, if you do it the first time, it's often that people will like, yeah, I've seen some things. And then like in trip number 5, they're like, okay, now it's kind of there. So is there like a rhythm of shedding in a way? Would you say that?
I think that it's very difficult to try to map out
Yeah.
progress
Mm.
and what an experience is going to look like in a very, very sort of like structured manner. I mean, think of therapy, right? Or think of any treatment that you do, in fact, but like think of your therapeutic journey, right? What does it look like for you in therapy, and what did it look like when you started to go to therapy, and what you expected it, what comes up, and then as you build a level of comfort with the therapist that you're with and the conversation, or you start to know yourself a bit better, because it's really this is a journey of getting to know yourself. That's really what this is ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
And finding a perspective of loving kindness towards you, uh, and eventually then through that to others. But it can show up in different ways, and it can be very different for different people, right? For example, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. uh, Ayahuasca was life-changing for me, and my defenses were so strong that it became difficult for me to sit with that. And ketamine was much more gentle, for example. Um, and uh, it took me a while. It took me a few years to work through the defenses and the belief system that I have, and that shifted over time, right? And so, for example, some people who have stronger defenses because they suffered some trauma or something significantly traumatic when they were younger. It might take more time to already understand that these are defenses and that they're not their enemy, but they also are something that the best that they could come up with at that moment in time to defend themselves, and how are they interacting with them. So that's what I'm like. I think what I'm saying is this is a nonlinear process, and
Mhm.
it's part to me of proper preparation. And I try to be as explicit about this as I can when I talk about psychedelics, is that, you know, managing expectations of what it's going to be towards how you're going to be able to work with it in a constructive manner that's kind towards yourself is really, really important, right? You can't fail. You have you're doing your best, you're showing up, and it takes some time sometimes to go through it. Um, I think that I do believe that, especially when you started working with psychedelics, there is an indexation often on the more sensational part of it, of what I see, big visuals and having, a very big mystical experience. But oftentimes what I've found is that true insight comes in quiet moments when I'm sitting with myself and listening.
And in what way would you say, I mean, you quickly touched on the neuroplasticity, and I find this, I mean, let's say the neuroplasticity with mushrooms is a different one, but it's interesting what you just said,
Actually
because
not different. Like the neural plasticity is the same for
is it the
psychedelics.
same?
It's the interaction on the neurons that's different, but and on which neurotransmitter it works to. But neuroplasticity is neuroplasticity.
Okay, so and it also, like, I mean, I think it's interesting just maybe quickly touch on the what you just started to explain, that it's something that is sometimes in a leading up to 6 months. Like you said, you have moments where you suddenly sit in a subway or like at home at breakfast, and that's when something comes to you into your mind that you haven't thought about in, I don't know, maybe 20 years sometimes, or even longer ago, like, because it all kind of comes up. So, I mean, and then again, people do these things to remember the things to work on. So, but let's say if somebody has, it can be quite significant what you remember. And as we said, you don't know when you will remember this thing. So with your therapist, or like, let's say the way Journey Clinical is approaching this, how is one basically, how should you move around this moments of insight that can be, that you kind of wish for because you want to find your why this is happening to me, why am I that way? But it can be also sometimes a really significant insight. So what is the therapeutical way of reacting in such a moment?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that people who come to do this work with psychedelics and ketamine, often they've tried a few other things. Like it's not like sometimes it's the first, like more and more people are adopting this as a primary treatment option. And, we see, for example, therapists who are talking about patients who are stuck,
Yeah,
been working with for a long time. And so, the strong defenses that establish themselves when you're traumatized are not something that we're necessarily aware of. Like and you're mostly dealing with some profound difficulty and discomfort in your life. I know that was true for me. I had depression and anxiety for most of my adult life. I had substance abuse issues. I had a lot of like things that came up for me, and it was I was just kind of like I really needed something to help me get out of this. Like it really was a lot of pain that brought me to that. Um, and it's not like a panacea, right? Like working with a therapist was really, I think, what really unlocked it for me. And so already kind of starting to notice what those defenses are, right? If you're not open to receiving, like you're very afraid of not being loved, and that's driving a lot of dynamics in your life that may not be healthy, and that drives you into unhealthy relationships and repeated patterns that hurt you because you're longing for something that's not accessible. it's not something that you're going to figure out immediately. Like it took me like 15, 20 years of my life to get there. But and you know, psychedelics when I definitely accelerated that. But effectively, like being able to work with someone to understand those patterns, but also being able to be in touch with them and see them. I think that's kind of like the first step, and understanding what they are, right? Is this, you might get an image or an insight that you don't completely comprehend. And that doesn't mean that you're stupid. It means that you're maybe not ready for it, right?
Yeah.
You're not ready to accept that and to process that. And you know, it does happen that people have you know, psychedelic experiences, and then, you know, a few weeks after they're in therapy, it comes up, and then you feel ready to essentially like accept that insight. I also think the setting is very important, right?
Yeah.
Doing it in the context where you feel safe with someone that you trust is a massive deal. If you're, you know, this is your therapist, you're comfortable with them, you know them, you've got this alliance that creates a container. That's what they're providing you, actually. It's a safe container. It allows you to kind of relax more into being okay with, you know, feeling something that you've built a defense to not feel maybe from your childhood, right? So I think that's where sort of like the moment comes in play where something might have come up for you, didn't either completely understand it or didn't completely hit home, and then, you know, a little bit after it can really hit there. But sometimes people have insights during the session that are very powerful, and having someone there to hold them and be there for them is also equally important.
Do you feel that, I mean, now like ketamine is, available because it's in a medical context, it's legal, and so, but there will be other, maybe soon, hopefully other psychedelics that will be able to use in a medical context. So do you feel that once you started this journey, it's kind of a lifelong thing, and you just, I mean, you open up to other experiences. You look into, I mean, I was terrified of ayahuasca, and now it's the first time I'm thinking like, maybe I should do it now in South America. So, but something in me apparently is now kind of, okay, so now you can check out next levels of something. So do you think it is a lifelong thing, or is it something where would say, some people say at one point, okay, now I have the intel, and now I'm kind of, the rest of my life, I'm kind of trying to integrate this, or is it always that you come back and you're like, no, I need to know more, kind of mind about yourself?
Yeah. First of all, I think anybody who does a psychedelic experience should always ask themselves why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And is it
Mhm.
just to have a psychedelic experience, which is maybe a perspective, or is it actually to do like why they
Yeah.
to do
Mhm.
some work? Um, I don't think psychedelics are like, you know, the cure to everything. I don't know that they're a lifelong thing. For some people, maybe. I think
Mhm.
if you consider the medical model and what we're looking at Journey at least, we believe that there's basically been no innovation in psychiatry for the past 50 years, right? And that we're on the cusp of mass adoption of these treatments as a primary standard of mental care for people. Because while current medication has some efficacy, outcomes are actually like not awesome, right? They're pretty low, and so roughly 30% of people don't respond to SSRIs, and these are lifelong treatments often for people. And
Most.
so having most of them, yeah, right. And so having treatment modalities that can cure the like the underlying cause and cause breakthrough relief versus symptom management is a really big deal. And so when you consider that context, you know, 50 million people in America, 300 million in the world, maybe more. You know, you have people who are looking for a modality that's going to be comfortable to them, that feels safe, that's in a context that is reassuring. And so, you know, they're going to be treated as needed, right? It may be that they only need one, maybe that they need, you know, follow-up consultations and treatments on a monthly basis for a while. And that's going to be adapted to the patient. So like if you take an example of Spravato, which is arguably the first FDA-approved psychedelic that is now a blockbuster drug and yeah, is really
Nasal
very
spray.
successful. It's actually like a ketamine derivative called S-ketamine. Like that treatment is twice a week for the first 4 weeks, and then weekly for ongoing. So there is some maintenance to that. Some, don't need it. Like I think some of the MDMA trials showed that people with 3 treatments, were feeling much better, although there wasn't a follow-up treatment on redosing. Psilocybin, might be, maybe they'll do it like, 3 to 4 times a year. I don't know. We're also waiting on real world research, but at least the early results are very promising. And our partners at Compass are hopefully going to be online next for approval. So I think that eventually we're going to have a spectrum of drugs that actually fall into the traditional medical model, right? And so that's what I think is really important, is not to separate the two. Like we do traditional medication management. Some people need to be on SSRIs. It's good for them. It's not good to take them off. But we integrate that into a broader holistic view of mental health, so that there's frontier treatments as well as more traditional ones working together, and then we can adapt also the rest of their medication. So I think when you're considering that over time, some psychedelics will be better suited for certain conditions or certain situations, and some not. And then, there's also life, right? You might work through early childhood trauma and be fine, and then maybe something else happens in life. You're very stressed, you lose your job, you experience something traumatic, and it might be a resource that can help you work through some
Yeah.
emotions. So I think that's where I would look at. I mean, you do have some lifelong seekers who have a different path, but I think when you think about the broad majority of people, I always think, well, will my grandma be comfortable doing this? And it needs to be for them really like clear. There is some education, and it is within the context of a medical model.
But I think a lot of grandparents are now open to this. I mean, my mother is now talking about their friends about FDA approvals the whole day, and she explains to everybody who the FDA is and why ketamine is crazy. So, I mean,
Yeah,
quite a success story. So I have, but I wanted to, since you mentioned it, I wanted to quickly have your take on. I mean, we all know the FDA didn't approve MDMA, so for a lot of people in the industry, in the psychedelic industry, it felt like a setback, or now everything is not happening. But it is also like, kind of connected to so many questions maybe that are around the elections and everything. So what is your take on the future, like in the next 2 years? And what is your take on what happened there, actually? Very
sure.
brief.
Of course, it's disheartening that MDMA did not get approved. Many people dedicated their lives, and a lot of people invested a lot of capital and resources, and a lot of patients really, like, it really helped a lot of people. You hear the veterans, and like a lot of people really, some of these testimonials are pretty amazing. And in fact, the FDA didn't dispute the efficacy of the treatments, right? They were actually like, they pointed out that the AdCom panel, that the efficacy was quite amazing. I think there was questions about the study structure and the requirement for them to come back with some more data. But it doesn't mean that it's dead. And more importantly, again, I think drawing back to Spravato, which is a drug that is a breakthrough drug. Like adoption of Spravato grew. It's $1 billion drug now, right? It grew 74% year over year in the past 12 months. It's just massive, right? It's the biggest growing drug in Janssen's portfolio. Compass are in phase 3 clinical trials for both PTSD and depression, and hopefully somewhere within the next 2 years we'll have FDA approval, and we have a lot of faith. We have a partnership with them, and there's a lot of I know how that team, they're awesome, and clearly, in my opinion, they will be next. And I don't know if you know this, but 90% of psychiatric drugs that are requesting approval at the FDA are actually psychedelics. So there's a tremendous pipeline of thousands of compounds coming down the line. Like this is essentially the innovation in psychiatry.
Hmm?
And it's, in my opinion, inevitable that it goes from sort of like emerging treatment to standard of care. And so we probably don't even know which will be sort of like the most used psychedelics, but like even MDMA, there are other companies developing shorter acting compounds that
I
won't take
believe.
as long. I mean, this is just the beginning of massive innovation on in the field of mental health.
Do you think that as a young therapist, it makes even sense to study classic psychiatry and psychology and not open up to yourself to psychedelic therapy?
I mean, I think that psychedelic therapy doesn't exist without classic psychology or psychotherapy. Like essentially, like the reason why we work with licensed mental health professionals is because actually the studies they make them overwhelmingly prepared to do this work. Um,
Okay.
the application of various styles of approaches to psychotherapy going from internal family systems where they work with different parts of you to traditional psychoanalysis to I mean, there's such a spectrum of approaches that are really amazing. And so those, applying those approaches and supporting them with the use of psychedelics, like that's supercharging that approach, but they're actually completely applicable to it, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so I think when we train people in psychedelic assisted therapy, these are all people who've done it, who have their license, who have thousands of hours of practice. And so we're complementing what they already know. And a large part really of getting people comfortable, a therapist comfortable doing that is actually like reminding them and empowering them to realize that they're actually ready for this pretty much already. They need to be trained. They need to go through, understanding our therapy protocols, and we have certain requirements, but it reinforces the baseline knowledge they already have.
So just a quick question before we almost finish. I know you have a hard stop. Um, so like how do you imagine, let's say, a disrupted psychiatry with, I mean, ketamine is now, there will be other substances, there might be molecules that AI generates in the next couple of years that maybe maybe we don't know.
Sounds
Yeah.
pretty far out, but maybe
Just as a
it's possible. I mean, AI is definitely going to play a role in drug development for sure. In clinical trials, AI is going to have a huge part, and it might accelerate and make them much cheaper mostly.
yeah, and also maybe like, reduce the time frame, whether you don't have to go on a retreat maybe anymore in a couple of years to go into this long experience, which some people, kind of for some reason that's what they look for, that they would have like a short, a fast acting kind of experience. But so how's your take on also in the context of journey clinical, how do you think the disruption will look like realistically, not like, like in a space movie or something, like just what is going to happen? What do you think is going to fall away? I mean, are SSRIs maybe going to fall away at one point?
Yeah. I don't think it's super healthy to sort of like vilify SSRIs in general. So I think there is a narrative that exists, and it's not entirely reasonable because, as I said, some people should be on SSRIs,
Mhm.
and it helps them. I think it's very similar to what we're doing now. So,
Mhm.
like any new treatment modality or adopting a new approach, it is almost like a new technology, right? To a certain extent. So when CT scans came online, it was a new thing that was novel, and now it became a standard practice for treatment. So this is no different, right? All of a sudden now you're getting access to a new option for treatment for patients and for supporting better outcomes. I do think that um, like our model, because of the collaborative care model and the specialization, allows for complex cases. I also know for a fact that, adoption, like there's a limited amount of like psychiatrists in America, and even psychiatric nurse practitioners, like 25,000 psychiatrists and 35,000
Okay.
nurse NPs in all of the country, right? So it's not a big amount of people. And generally, they specialize in more traditional med management. So here there is probably like the speed of adoption you need to have companies like us that specialize to support at scale these treatments. So like if you look at Spravato, they were originally planning on having psychiatry practices adopted, and then Spravato clinics came up it didn't really work actually. So they had to provide up clinics, and that sort of like really helped the drug take off. But I think the adoption in the therapy practices is going to spread very quickly, and we've seen that it's happening. So there's a long answer to telling you that I think it's exactly what's going on at Journey Clinical. It's going to look like basically like, okay, so you're in treatment with your therapist, you have, these treatments that you're already on, you know, you've done the ketamine therapy that like your current progress as might impact, or how that has impacted your mental health might impact how we're giving you the other drugs. What are your doses? Are these drugs still working, or should we adapt your treatment? And I think that the addition of multiple compounds is simply going to be another treatment modality. So I think it's going to be less like science fiction, more like traditional medicine, and a modality that's available. I do think that shorter acting compounds are likely going to dominate. That's one of the reasons why ketamine is actually quite effective. Is it's 90 minutes. They don't need to leave, like you said, their town. Like not everybody wants to go to the jungle and do a 7-day retreat with ayahuasca. And there's a bunch of them coming down, MDMA, shorter compounds, all that. So I think that that's probably what it's going to look like.
Do you have a hard time if you talk to, let's say, classic doctors to convince them of psychedelics, or is this also falling away at people? I mean, now it's a lot of media coverage, mostly not negative. So is it something you feel that you don't have to explain so much anymore recently?
I think that, we work in this space, so we have a bit of a echo chamber. We
Yeah.
all know exactly what we're talking about, but I think that actually many people still want to be educated by it. And, my grandma, she has an idea, but she's also my grandma, but someone else's grandma might not know. And so, I think it's really important for us to promote a safe and conscious model. You talked about media coverage. Of course, what came up recently with Matthew Perry is concerning. We know there are potentials for abuse, and being very, very intentional about that, and making sure that that is addressed and looked at is really important. So, we care about patient safety and efficacy first and foremost. And so we want to be the adults in the room. It's really important for us. And I think that, some doctors need education about that, and they need to know. And also, traditional psychiatry is really, to date, psychiatric medication management to a certain extent, right? It's very short calls where they're working with the patient to do refills, but it's not really therapy, right? And actually, the care of a patient is usually pretty disjointed. Like they have the therapist, they don't communicate with the medical professionals, they don't communicate with the psychiatrist, and patients go to to see the medical professional just for refills or for an update, right? We really believe that collaborative care, and including that feedback loop between the therapist and the medical team, is hyper important to actually properly adapt the treatment plan for the patient. And this takes more work. So, it can be complex cases. It can be people who need more insight, and even psychedelics require, we do full hour intakes. We check for counterindications. We do follow-ups. Our whole platform allows to monitor the event and report them. We have a vigilance system that our prescribers are on call. So like not everybody wants to do this either, right? So there's some degree of complexity, and as new compounds come online, I can tell you that the degree of complexity will increase, right? So the requirements will increase as well, and we've already solved for those. So that means that while all therapists can do this, specialist organizations like Journey are necessary to be able to deliver this at scale.
Last question, how big is Journey Clinical in 5 years?
I think we are building a generational defining behavioral health business. And I think that, as we expand into psychedelics and take on even broader behavioral health for our patients, we have insurance, we process the claims for the therapy, which means we're getting treatments covered. We are we are partnering with a therapist to really support the whole of their practice. And so, I think that we're going to be one of the most category defining companies in the history of mental health.
That means also the disruption of many generational traumas eventually.
Yeah,
In the
I mean, look, that's the sometimes I forget what I'm doing every day because I sit in front
yeah.
of a computer and work with my colleagues to make sure that everything's going well. But one of my favorite things is talking to our member therapists, and I've had the pleasure of speaking to some of our patients as well. And you know, it's changing their lives, and it's helping people get better. We have on our channel we have our Facebook interface. We have a channel called Client Wins, and it's like the best channel in the world. I love it so much. We have people saying rest in peace, depression,
Oh,
life
really?
change, a new lease on life. Another one was called. I mean, it's really quite beautiful. And actually, 87% of our patients have seen some improvement in their outcomes. So this is like massive. And we forget every day what we do, but this is very rewarding. This is why I do it, because it changed my life. And I really care of doing this responsibly and safely. That's really important to me.
Great. I know your lunch break's over now. Thank you for doing this. I know you have a busy day. I have a busy evening.
I'm
So
sure.
thank you so much. It was really interesting. It's always like a new thing coming to a
Yeah,
new topic when we talk.
it's
Super
always a
interesting.
pleasure. I always have the best time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Same
you.
here.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Right.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye. Olivia?
Yep.